So the first thing that I think that I really learned this year was planning a shoot and pairing it with the right ISO film is going to help. If you have lots of sunny weather, you're going to need a lower ISO. Shooting 800 ISO is going to be next to impossible on most cameras, as they cannot shoot fast enough or have enough aperture to stop down. Some older cameras also have a limited shutter speed. Both my Mamiya RV67 645 and C220 only have a max shutter speed of between 4 to 500. On a bright sunny day, my meters can be saying a shutter speed of up to even 4,000. Especially if you're wanting to take a photo with a really shallow depth of field where stopping down with a large aperture is just not going to be able to provide you that kind of photo. Often during summer, 50 or 100 ISO is what I'll ever use at max. However, if it's winter, then 400 ISO is usually where I'll have it, as even on nice sunny days, this isn't too much because winter sun is nowhere near as strong, and it still gives me quite a bit of range in the afternoon when it gets a little bit darker. However, if you are shooting fast action, then higher ISO will do better, but again, that really depends on what your camera can do. FOMO is real, especially with algorithms. The more you look into the hobby, the more the Instagrams and the YouTubes will try to show you more cool cameras. And when you come across something unique, you might just not be able to stop yourself from buying it if you've got the money. You might even find yourself bulk watch listing cameras. But once you have the major formats, there is less of a reason to buy different cameras if you are not really gaining anything different from them. All my cameras have a purpose and range. I have 3 main 35mm giving me the ability to choose different stocks if I have more than one project on. Then each of my medium format cameras each have a different purpose by providing me a different format to shoot on, to give my art a range of different styles and looks. I can't justify buying a Hasselblad when I already have a decent 6x6 camera. However, I still would like one, and that's the thing about FOMO. It is real. FOMO is not just for cameras, it's also for film. The more I understand the complexities of how film is made and how the industry was flipped on its head, and learning about all these cool film stocks, I find myself wanting more unique film stocks. And when I come across a really good listing, especially if it's a good deal, then it's very hard to not be able to help myself to buying something, because there is a sense of urgency when this film doesn't exist anymore. However, for a lot of people, buying expired film probably is not worth it for them. They're actually just better off going into the store, paying standard market price, and getting film that is going to be more consistent and that they actually get some enjoyment out of it. One thing I would recommend is to get yourself a test roll or two to double check when your cameras are kind of working, and are they working? So all these new cameras that you might buy, you're going to need test rolls. For me, I have 2 types of test rolls. One is a spare cheap color film. I always have some stocked around just in case, because with black and white you can't necessarily see where the light is leaking from. However, with color film, if you buy a new camera, you can see that if it's a certain kind of color, you most likely have a certain kind of leak. So it makes it much easier to pinpoint if there is any issues with this new old gear that you've bought. The other type of test roll is a dead roll, and what that is in 2 forms. One is your standard 35mm film. It's a unused or damaged or misused roll that's been rolled back into the canister. This allows you to make sure that your 35mm camera is working correctly as it should be in situations where something goes wrong and you're trying to figure out, is there an issue with the camera? The other kind of dead roll is a paperback roll. And what that is just your standard 120 roll. However, what you've done is once you've had the film developed, you ask the store for the paperback. Then you roll it onto the spool, and you can then put it through your medium format camera, and you can do testing to make sure that the camera is working correctly. Because with a lot of these cameras, they will not operate if you don't have film inside them. If you don't have any paperbacks around, what you can do is you can actually use a bad roll of developed 120 film and then just use some tape to lock it in. For me, the cheap color film that I use is Kodak Ultramax, as it's about the cheapest around, and I always have a few canisters around sitting in my fridge that I can pull out at any time and just go through and just make sure that that camera is going to be worth putting a more expensive or better film stock in it later. Every camera you buy is going to take time to get used to. When you are looking through a camera, you are going to get used to a certain point of view. Different frames and lens sizes are going to make an impact on what you see. For example, a 6x6 camera view is just going to be different, as it does not have a difference between its tallest and widest points. This is just not how we see the world, so it's a drastic change. Adding into the fact that the rule of thirds is much harder to apply when the rule of thirds applies to every point in the image. To me, this makes shooting on 6x6 a lot harder to get photos compositionally right and have all the details in the right points that they should be. Another example of what I would consider difficult getting used to is if you've always used SLRs, is getting used to a rangefinder. With an SLR, you basically see your shot. With a rangefinder, you're seeing more than the image, and it can be quite hard to get the composition right due to the difference in magnification. As with the SLR, you can see the image magnified directly, whereas with a rangefinder, you cannot. So one of the lessons I learned this year was about expired film and how to shoot it. From my experience when it comes to color film, halving the ISO for every 10 years definitely holds true. I've shot a number of rolls this year that were 100 ISO, that I shot at 25 and still exposed correctly, or with 200 ISO that I shot at 50 ISO and came out well. However, this rule does not really hold true if the film is frozen or fridged. You can, for the most part, shoot at box speed, I find, when you get an item that has been stored well. However, you still have to be careful because sometimes that film has not been held well as it should have been. Which is why I recommend buying at least a few rolls in bulk, because if you find one roll is underexposed when you shoot it, you can guess the number of stops that it's underexposed by. Then on your second, third, fourth roll of that expired film that may no longer exist, you can adjust the ISO and get the most out of that film stock that no longer exists. I also find you can shoot black and white at box speed most of the time, and the 10-year rule doesn't really hold true for black and white because it just doesn't color shift. However, if it has been improperly stored, it will be as bad as these Ilford shots that are near unusable, but I suspect in this situation they were around a lot of moisture for quite a period of time and humidity. I would highly recommend buying expired film in bulk. See this roll? I bought this in bulk and took these photos. All these photos are underexposed now. As this is a rare film and I may not have any good luck with another purchase, at least buying it in bulk gives me the ability to try expose it more and get the most out of it. And hopefully it will be fine. So that's what I intend to do. Sure, you do run the risk of buying a load of crap, but in my experience, buying in bulk gives you the flexibility to do what is needed. So the final lesson I learned for 2023, and I think this is a really important one for anyone wanting to get into film. You are going to spend money, and you need to be able to afford to do so. Film is an expensive hobby, and if you get FOMO and want to try out some cool Instagram-worthy YouTube video cameras, then you are going to spend money. And sometimes you might buy a brick or a camera that works really well for a while and then bricks itself. And even if you're not looking at getting the most trendy camera, there is a chance that you buy a camera, you really like it, or you were handed down one, and then all of a sudden it just breaks. And if you really want to continue the hobby, you are going to need to be able to afford to either get it fixed or get it replaced, as none of these cameras exist anymore, and that's just the way that it is. Now, to finish off this video, it represents my experience in my first year running this YouTube channel and really getting into film photography, and will relate to people like myself who may have some hobby money and are prone to FOMO or are just a similar kind of personality. This will not reflect everyone's first year. Anyway, this year has been fun. It's been real, guys. Until next time.